Welcome, everyone. My name is Adeline Joshua. I'm Big Tent USA's Senior Program and Engagement Manager. We are so thrilled to be hosting our very first Substack Live with two fabulous democracy warriors, Mary Trump and Jessica Yellen.
Thank you so much for having us. And Mary, what a special privilege it is to talk to you. Before I begin, I think I want to say on behalf of everybody, thank you for what you do, using your voice and your expertise to help us make a little bit of sense of the wild things we're living through.
Jessica, it's so great to be here. And Big Tent people, thank you so much for doing this. I've been looking forward to this. And I think we have a lot to cover.
Yes,
yeah, as you know, there's a thing or two going on in the world right now.
I just want to start with what's happened this week at the NATO summit.
Yeah.
There's so much we could talk about, but just yesterday, Trump appeared to call Zelensky Putin. He referred to the Islamic Republic of Japan. We have consistently for months now seen bruising on his hands, reports of leg swelling. He's constantly seemingly falling asleep in public. Yeah. As a psychologist and somebody who knows him, how do you assess his current mental and physical state?
Yeah, I think that the most important way to understand where Donald is in terms of his emotional, psychological, physical, and cognitive health is to realize that we basically have a perfect storm here. He's somebody who has had long-standing, undiagnosed, and untreated psychiatric disorders like for decades. And as you know, with pretty much many illnesses, including psychiatric ones, if they're untreated, they get worse over time. We know from him that he's continually being asked to take cognitive assessments, which suggest that there's some cognitive decline going on. And of course, Alzheimer's runs in my family. I'm desperately hoping it skips my generation, but there is a very strong genetic component to Alzheimer's. And there are many times during which I see strong similarities between Donald's behavior and my grandfather's behavior. As you mentioned, the hypersomnolence, he cannot stay awake during the day unless people are talking about him. That seems to be the only thing that keeps him
crazy.
Up. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. We see an increasing lack of impulse control, which is another potential symptom. And I'm not, as far as the psychiatric stuff, I'm coming at this from a clinical psychologist. But for the cognitive stuff, I'm coming at this from somebody who saw what happened to Donald's dad. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the clear physical symptoms, the swelling of the ankles and his hands and the bruising and his inability to walk a straight line. There's so much going on with him right now that I think it shouldn't surprise us that he's increasingly erratic and belligerent and violent. Yeah. It's just his rhetoric about Iran is completely insane.
Yeah, there's a bloodlust in it.
Yeah.
That's unnerving. Curious to get your sense of what the public most misunderstands about Donald Trump.
I think part of it is because they're being led to misunderstand this. We've heard people like former acolytes, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, say that Donald's not the man they knew. But the truth of the matter is that because of his declines, he's actually revealing who he's been all along. He's just not able to cover it up as well as he used to. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think people are overreading is his strength. Donald is an incredibly weak person. And one of the reasons he's been allowed to continue in this vein for so long is because people afford him the benefit of believing that he's actually strong. Now, of course, the problem is he has an enormous amount of power, but as an individual, he's very weak. And I think that's why so many people have missed the opportunity to press him because of the office he holds and the power he wields. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, and how vindictive he is.
Oh my God. That is one of the most revealing things. His vindictiveness is also a sign of weakness, not of strength.
So let's unpack that, because you've said that if we understand his internal logic, we understand his pathology, we'll get his logic and know how to challenge him. What about the psychology you just laid out explains his election lies, his need for loyalty, his rage at criticism, the constant lying, and the greed and corruption?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's going to sound simplistic, but I promise you this is actually what's going on. There are a few things. First of all, Donald is now and has always been a terrified little boy. And the thing he's, as an adult, been most terrified of is being seen as a loser, as being revealed to be who he actually is. And in my family, and Donald understood this in a very visceral way, because he saw what happened to my dad, who was the oldest son in the family and about 7.5 years older than he was. Being a loser, in my grandfather's definition of the term, was essentially a death sentence, literally or metaphorically. So Donald is desperate not to be seen that way, even though on a very deep level, he knows that's exactly what he is. More fundamentally, however, we are in the position we're in. He's acting the way he's acting, and he's putting us at risk in the way he's putting us at risk, because he is what I've described as a black hole of need. The problem for Donald and for the rest of us is that the thing he most needs is to be loved. However, thanks to a very difficult childhood and thanks to the fact that his father was a sociopath, he has been rendered unlovable. So he continues to try to fill that void with more money, more power, more violence, more threats, and none of it is ever enough. I mean, if we look at most recently, the birthday party he threw for himself, right? That $60 million cage match on the White House lawn, the People's House, that was to fill that void. And he probably woke up the next morning and recognized that it still wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And he's still empty and lonely and unloved.
Today, he's covered up with a tarp part of the north portico of the White House, and he's redoing it again, too. It's like he can't stop tinkering with what is the public's trusted domain. Okay, so let's talk about how the psychology teaches us about how to engage with him. You said he's this black hole of need. Any of us who've dealt with like a malignant narcissist understand what that is. It's not something that can be repaired. You can't undo it or help them grow out of it. You can manage them, though, I guess, to some extent. We've seen that he's vulnerable to mockery. He's vulnerable to having his incompetence exposed. Mm-hmm. So why do those two features work on him in a way that just ordinary criticism does not? And what else do you think are smart ways to put boundaries on him?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, because so many people have failed to understand how to deal with him. And that has increased his power, and it has increased his vindictiveness, and the damage that he can do. So, the worst thing you can do is let Donald think that you think he has all the power and that he's strong. And that's why, now I'm using the term sort of colloquially, somebody with antisocial personality is not going to be offended if you call him a rapist, or you call him a criminal, or you call him a thug, because in his mind, he's going to take that as something that increases his street cred, and it's going to make him feel tough and strong. And we've seen this, and I think this is an indictment of a lot of people on the right. When Donald has gotten away with things or been accused of things, his popularity goes up in certain quarters. So that should alarm us all. But we've also seen institutions of higher learning, white shoe law firms, members of NATO, and corporate media companies capitulate to him.
Totally.
And that is just more permission for him to keep doing what he's doing. And one thing, credit where credit is due, Donald's always been quite good at is pushing the envelope to see what he can get away with, and then push it more and get away with more. So we've seen increasingly, I mean, this has always been the case, but it's increasingly the case, that whenever a journalist or reporter pushes back, even asks a fact-based question, the answer of which he doesn't like, he loses his mind, especially if the person asking the question is a woman. We need more of that. And this is something that's always blown my mind. In the White House, and you have a lot of experience with this, in the White House press room, why did, if he refused to answer a question, didn't the next person ask the same question until he answered it? So it would have been great if there had been this coordinated effort, and that's what we've always needed. You know, in 2020, unfortunately, I think the Democratic Party treated this like politics as usual, and it's not. So we need to have people pressing him, pressuring him, insisting upon answers. He's not a king. He's the president of the United States. He owes us answers. And for far too long, he's gotten away with not giving them. And as you mentioned, the other superpower we have is to mock him, because he's eminently mockable. He's incompetent. He's out of his depths. And when anybody holds up a mirror to him, he falls apart.
I wonder why I always thought that if I were to interview him, I would ask the same question the whole interview, basically. Right. Small changes, but he can't respond after the third question and then goes to some. Why is that?
Because, you know, again, he's so he has so many severe psychopathologies that a lot of what he feels is unconscious. He doesn't have access to it, because actually having access to it would render him incapable of functioning, actually. So he has a very strong defense mechanism about acknowledging the truth about who he is. So if somebody else is pointing it out to him, that is unacceptable. And unfortunately, like when there was an opportunity back in 2015, 2016, and let's face it, like back in the 80s, to press him because he didn't have the ability to pull the "I'm the president of the United States" card, people didn't challenge him. And therefore, he's been able to get away with so much. He's never been forced to give us actual evidence of the things he claims. You know, things like, I know more than the generals. Really? How? Like, how does that work exactly? So, and now he just, if he doesn't like it, and we saw this a few weeks ago, he literally takes the microphone off, stomps out of the room, and has a temper tantrum. And that's the end of it.
He can't feel being exposed for his inadequacies.
Right.
Let me ask you something that was in the new book. I think probably everybody here is aware of Change by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. They report that a very small group of people are effectively running the country around him. Mm-hmm. You know, from what you know of him, is his inner circle shrinking, or has he always needed a handful of closely held people near him because he trusts so few people?
Yeah. Again, another excellent question, because one thing about Donald is that he doesn't evolve. He's never evolved. And neither has his way of being in the world. And I fault my grandfather for that, for many reasons, but a couple, because he's the one who created the myth that Donald is this self-made, brilliant entrepreneurial businessman. And he protected Donald from his own incompetence. So from the very
while he was cruel to Donald, he also made him this mythic figure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, the cruelty was neglect. And that was when Donald was very young. But there came a time when Donald was a teenager that my grandfather realized, for reasons I still don't quite understand, that my father, his namesake, the oldest son, was not the person he wanted to take over his real estate empire. He decided it was going to be Donald. So his allegiance shifted and his behavior towards Donald shifted. So Donald went from being neglected to being spoiled. I mean, treated very differently from all of his siblings. During my grandfather's lifetime, Donald received over $410 million in loans and unpaid loans and gifts. So he was completely insulated from any mistakes he made because my grandfather was always there to bail him out. So the way I think the best way to explain this is that in a way, Donald has always been institutionalized. You know, he went from the safety of my grandfather's company, Trump Management, to the Trump Organization, which essentially was started with my grandfather's money and connections, to the White House, which is a very secure, pampered environment. Like all your needs are met. Like I don't believe that Donald could exist in the world on his own. So he needs a small core of people to make sure that he gets what he needs, and in exchange for that, and by what he needs, I don't mean just his material needs. I mean his ego needs. Being told 20 million times a day that he's the best, the greatest, his polls are fantastic, the economy's better than it's ever been, that kind of stuff. But also, in exchange for that, and this is why this is a dangerous situation for the rest of us, those people are handed an enormous amount of power. I mean, I think there's truth to some degree in the in saying that Stephen Miller is running the country right now. Which should terrify us because he's terrifying.
To pause. Yeah. I always say, everybody pause and breathe for a moment.
Sorry.
Yeah, right. Talking about the people who cater to Trump and have enormous power, Republicans in Washington.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we've ever seen this degree of obedience to one leader in modern American politics, period. Maybe not in our history. Even when he demands things that are illegal, even when he violates norms, even when he undermines the authority of Congress. Mm-hmm. How do you explain that obedience? And is this a parallel to almost like a narcissist and their codependence?
Yeah, I think that is definitely part of it. I essentially put the people who continue to capitulate to him in 3 or 4 different groups. One is the group of people who are just cynical and they don't care. They just know that if they give in to Donald, if they give him $1 million for his library or $10 million for his ballroom, they're going to get billions of dollars in government contracts. So that's, you know, they're going to settle a frivolous lawsuit with him because $10 million is not a lot considering they might get hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in government contracts. Same thing with people in Congress. You know, they just are so attached to their own power and so drunk on the proximity to power, they don't care. They're going to understanding that right now he is the only person in the Republican Party who connects with the base, and they still need him. So they don't care, even if it means giving up their own constitutionally granted powers. Then, of course, there are the people who are just afraid of him, which I don't understand, because the idea of being afraid of Donald is ludicrous to me.
Even when he's the power of the DOJ and will weaponize it.
Yeah, even with that. It's just all you do then. And I look at somebody like Mark Rutte, who is just continuing to kowtow to Donald. It never ends well for people who remain loyal to Donald in the face of his complete lack of deserving it. Because I liken people like that, people who are loyal to Donald out of fear, or because they like the proximity to power. I liken them to people who chain smoke and know that smoking causes cancer, but they think that they're immune and they won't get cancer. Like we have seen time and time again, everybody eventually gets thrown under the bus. So then, of course, there are the true believers. There is a not insignificant number of people who actually like the cruelty. They like the anti-immigrant hatred and the racism and the misogyny and the fascism. And they are in it because that's what they want this country to be down the road. And those are the people, you know, it's hard to say which of those groups is more dangerous. I think they all present certain dangers, but I think it's the cynical capitulators and the true believers we need to watch out for.
It's a lot of people.
It is.
One of the things we really need to watch out for is the election. And a lot of folks here are very concerned about protecting it. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, what should people be watching for, and how vital is this for Trump's own psychological well-being, that the Republicans win? Because he seems to not care about the midterms, but he does care about the midterms, but back and forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. He cares desperately about the midterms because he knows if Republicans lose, he's going to be in a lot of trouble potentially. Or, well, I mean, he's gotten away with everything. But I think even he understands that things are different now, that the context in which this is playing out is very different now.
Yeah.
But what's weird is that he doesn't seem to care about the Republican Party, even as he's pulling out all of the stops to rig the election in his favor. So to people who are watching this with alarm, I would say, first of all, that is a sign of such debilitating weakness. Donald knows that he can only win by cheating. That is not leading with strength. That is an admission that you cannot win fairly. And that should motivate us to show up in even greater numbers, not despite, but because of everything they're trying to do, everything the corrupt Supreme Court supermajority is trying to do to limit our ability to vote. We just need to override all of that, because when we win in November, which is to say, when pro-democracy, pro-constitution, pro-American people win in November, we're going to set this straight. And if we don't, then it's going to be much harder in 2028.
Yeah. I go back and forth when you talk about him as being so weak and desperate to hide his inadequacies and essentially thin-skinned, and say he should be challenged. It becomes concerning because a person who feels that weak and threatened can be quite dangerous, right? They lash out.
Absolutely.
And, I wonder if you think that the election is the time when he feels the most exposed, and what regular folks can do. People feel so powerless around all this.
Yeah, and that's fair. And again, I understand. I don't want to pretend that this is not a dangerous situation. Donald is a nihilist, and he doesn't believe that anybody or anything can or should exist beyond him, which is not a good situation considering how much real power he has. Also, if he ever could acknowledge that he's going down, he will want to take all of us down with him. So I know it sounds like mocking him and attacking him, attacking his weaknesses feels dangerous, but he's not going to blow up the planet because he's getting humiliated. And remember, much of his humiliation lately is coming from things he's doing. He's humiliating himself, right? Humiliating him and attacking his weaknesses and presenting him with the truth of things weakens him. So the kind of thing that would provoke him to do something completely dangerous is outside of our control. So what we need to do is weaken him so that if something does happen to trigger some kind of overblown response, he's not going to be capable of carrying it out. And I think we have to hope that there are people, even though it doesn't feel like it some days, there are people throughout the government, dedicated civil servants who are still in their positions, who won't let this go too far. But we have a few months to keep chipping away. And I hope that more people who have access to him, like journalists and reporters and our allies who are heads of state, continue to chip away as well, because that's what it's going to take. He's a very weak man who's getting weaker, and I don't want to engender any kind of sympathy for him. And I know this might sound cruel, but we have to exploit his weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. And as you're saying this, it is true that some people are fighting back, resisting, and having success, both in the courts and some institutions. Increasingly, some media companies that were caving are not, and they have been constrained to some degree by all of that. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious to know, when you talk about his psychology, for example, when we think about something like the reflecting pool, does he know that he caused that deep down and he just says the stuff? Or does he actually believe his own, book?
Yeah, I think that there was a time when the lie was intentional to protect to assuage his narcissistic injury. For example, the big lie after the 2020 election. He knows he knew he lost, but he also knew that if he convinced enough people that he won, that would make him feel better about himself, and then maybe he could change the narrative. What's happened over time is that he actually, like, I don't even think he's lying anymore. I think he actually believes that some vandal, not him driving a 20,000-pound car across the bottom of the reflecting pool, went in there with a box cutter, and destroyed his beautiful project. So I think that is another sign of how degraded his cognition is, that he is so delusional at this point and is so incapable of taking responsibility for anything that he's willing to tell and believe the most absurd lie.
Mm-hmm. I know in the first term, he did this, public facing, private facing thing where he would do what he, put on the show. And then behind closed doors, he'd meet even with reporters and be like, I got them going, I just had to do something for the headlines today. And he was sort of like in on the joke. Yeah. Less so. It seems much less so now. I want to ask you one last question from me, and then we're going to go to audience questions, which we have a ton of. In your view, what does accountability look like for Donald Trump?
Unfortunately, for various reasons, most prominently, the work the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court has done to immunize Donald, I think it's highly unlikely he goes to prison. I personally would like to see him in The Hague, because from USAID to the way he's treated immigrants, to what he's ordering the military to do in the Caribbean Sea, to COVID, et cetera. He's responsible for an incalculable number of deaths that should never have happened. So unfortunately, I don't know that that's going to happen. What accountability might look like is that the right people get into power, seize his assets and the assets his children have stolen from the American people or taken illicitly, and use those assets to remove every horrible monument he's built to himself, remove his name from everything, and restore the agencies that he's destroyed, restore as much as possible of those things he's destroyed, and just box him out, make him irrelevant, and hold other people who aren't immunized by egregious Supreme Court rulings in a real way. A lot of people from Pete Hegseth on down, and some of his children, et cetera, need to be indicted for the serious crimes, financial and against humanity, that have been committed.
Powerful. Okay, I'm going to go to audience questions, and right away we already have a question about the Trump children. Yeah. They're asking, is there any world in which you think the children take control? And I'm guessing this would be, and get him elder care. In other words, responsibly step in and say he's not fit. And then they're also asking, is Don Jr. the heir apparent?
Sorry. No. First of all, to your first question first, this is, again, I have no interest in generating any compassion for Donald, because I saw how he treated his father. His father made him wealthy beyond comprehension. His father made him famous in a way that he never would have become on his own. And when my grandfather started succumbing to Alzheimer's, Donald treated him horribly. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. the problem for Donald and his children and other people in that family is that every single relationship they have is transactional, and that includes relationships between parents and children. So there is no incentive that I can see for his children to step in and protect him from himself, because they don't care about him. Are they still making lots of money? Yes. Great. Are they not? Well, guess what? They're just going to disappear. Just ask Ivanka, whom we never hear about anymore. So I think it is one of the greatest indictments of this family is that there is not one person in it who cares enough about Donald to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you need to resign. Maybe you need to step away from this because you're just hurting yourself. They don't care enough to do it.
But aren't they afraid of him, like he's the mafia boss kind of vibe?
Well, I mean, maybe, but he's allegedly also still their dad, and they should, care a little bit, I guess, because they'd have nothing if it weren't for, well, for my grandfather, certainly. But, they wouldn't be making the kinds of extraordinary money they're making now if it weren't for the fact that Donald's in the Oval Office. So they owe everything to him.
Yeah, and it's better for them cash-wise if he stays there. Yes.
Exactly. And I mean, again, I just find it difficult to see how anybody in close proximity to him finds him frightening, because he's so frail and, he's clearly struggling, but there's not one person on this planet who cares enough about him to intercede. And as for Donnie, no. The other thing about Donald, he doesn't want anybody to succeed him because he doesn't think anybody should. There's nobody good enough. That's why he's not endorsing anybody, and he never will. So, and it's certainly not going to be Donnie. He wouldn't even go to the guy's wedding.
I know. I actually felt almost bad for Don Jr. that his dad wouldn't go. I know. Yes.
Yeah, but I get it.
It's like terrible. Your dad can't be bothered. I love this next question. Did you know Roy Cohn, and did he have more influence on Trump than Fred did?
Thankfully, I never had the misfortune of meeting Roy Cohn, but we were in the same room a couple of times. We were both at Donald's first wedding, but I was 12. So, thankfully I didn't know who he was, and there's literally no reason in the world anybody would have introduced me to him. So bullet dodged, because he was one of the most vile humans who ever lived. There was a time as Donald got older and was in Manhattan more, that Cohn did have more of an influence over him, and my grandfather's influence over him waned. And the best example of that is my grandfather did not want Donald to go into Atlantic City and build casinos, and Donald wouldn't listen to him. And as we know, it ended up disastrously, because 6 bankruptcies later, Donald had failed miserably in Atlantic City. But you can't pick 2 worse influences than my grandfather, the sociopath, and Roy Cohn, also the sociopath.
Amazing. What an amazing cauldron he came from. This is a good question too. What drives the late night tweet storms?
Donald, like my grandfather, believed that sleep was for the weak, which I've always found a fascinating position, because sleep is for the tired. Like sleep is like food, sleeping with food, eating.
Necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's something it's like breathing. You need to sleep. But Donald has clearly taken that to heart. So, and I'm sure drinking 12 Diet Cokes a day doesn't help make it any easier sleep. So he's always been a creature of the night. And it's only like the last year that he started falling asleep during the day. Right. So I think that's about, he's alone, his defenses are down a little bit, and maybe he's starting to look at what people are really saying about him, because during the day, I think he's surrounded by yes men who just tell him what he wants to hear and protect him from the horrible polling or, what other world leaders are saying about him or what have you. So in the middle of the night, nobody's around to do that. So he gets defensive and he starts lashing out. And also, for reasons I don't quite understand, although it's hopefully the only thing he and I have in common. He really took to social media, especially the Twitter format, and it's because it's reactive and it's immediate and it doesn't require massive language skills,
or much thought. Yeah.
So I think it's all defensive. I think it used to be much more strategic. Now it's defensive, and we're essentially watching in real time somebody's id just being unleashed.
Right. Unfiltered, no impulse control, just
yeah.
That's what it reads like. We have a couple questions about Melania. I'll compress them into one. My favorite is, what is going on with Melania? And then also, what is she getting out of the relationship? I'm thinking coin, but yeah.
Yeah, Melania probably had a very good lawyer who negotiated an extremely lucrative postnup. And, she shows up if she gets paid for it. So
I've heard that before, per the visit, like she negotiates an appearance fee, basically.
Yeah, probably. And listen, she knew exactly who Donald was when she married him. So there's no excuse to make for her. Her relationship with him is as transactional as any of his relationships with anybody else. She's no better than he is. She's only in it for the money. And, if people think I'm being hard on her, I will say this. They have they have one child together, Baron. I don't know how, he's 19 or 20 years old. They allow him, because we've been told all along that, Melania wants to protect Baron from all sorts of things, right? She and Donald have allowed Baron, their 19 or 20-year-old son, to become friends with Andrew Tate, who is a rapist and sex trafficker of women, who has styled himself as a misogynist who likes to treat women horribly. So spare your sympathies for Melania. Imagine doing that to your child. It's unspeakable.
Well, she has a much better life now than she had when she was growing up. I mean,
yeah, I get you. Sure. I mean, if the only thing that matters to you is money and influence, then I guess, yeah.
As they say, she got the bag. Why are the tech bros like Elon Musk so attracted to Trump? And I would love for you to address this. Obviously, they get a lot of government contracts out of it. It's very lucrative for business. They waive regulations. They have a lot of influence. Mm-hmm. Is there something beyond that?
Yeah, I think that it's very similar to why a lot of people in the Republican base, are attracted to Donald. It's not because they think he's strong or cool or any of those other things that he pretends to be, and those non-fungible token things, those virtual playing cards that they put out. It's two reasons. They like that Donald always gets away with it, and they like the fact that this weak, unaccomplished, incompetent person has failed upward so spectacularly. And I think they identify with that and they aspire to it. That's my theory.
Wow. So is it that if they have a little imposter syndrome, he makes them feel better about it?
Yeah.
Or they actually admire?
No, I think that's true. I think that's true.
There are a couple of questions about the future of MAGA. Do you have a prediction after Trump? And how does Donald handle succession? You've said that he thinks nobody can fill his shoes.
Right.
And someone must run things after him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he has any intention of leaving. I think it's part of what the ballroom / bunker might be about. But, it's not going to be up to him eventually. So I think it's kind of up to us. Those of us who still believe in this country, still believe in democracy, still believe that there is hope and that we can turn this around. It's up to us to make sure that the people who have enabled these horrors are held accountable and don't ever get anywhere near the levers of power again. We need to be prepared. There will come a time when many, if not all of these people will say, it was all Donald. We hated it, but we didn't have a choice. No, he's a symptom of a much larger problem. They're the problem. They have created this monster. and they have to be held responsible for it.
And that means to you prosecution.
Where it's warranted, it also means just locking them out electorally. Do not ever allow people like this to get into office again, or again, be appointed to anything. I think we need to be very clear about that.
You mentioned in your answer that's what you think the ballroom is about. Say a little more about that. What do you think he's up to with the ballroom?
Well, I mean, it's such a weird thing to be fixated on, and I think that part of it, ballrooms don't cost 400 million or 500 or 600, however many millions it is now. It's what's underneath that structure, the bunkers that already exist, but I guess he's making them fancy and gold leafed or something. I think one thing Donald regrets more than anything else is leaving the White House in January of 2021. I don't think that he has any intention of leaving. I'm not saying he's going to get away with it, but I think that is part of it. And also, he's very paranoid. And we see how he talks about his sort of his dark nuclear fantasies, right? So I'm not saying that there's anything specific going on, but he's a paranoid person who is enamored with violence. So he wants to make sure that he's safe, even if nobody else is. So I think that's part of it too. I'm not saying it's practical, and I'm not saying it's going to work, but sadly, there are plenty of people throwing millions of dollars at this project of his, who probably know what's going on. So that's what I think that's about.
I imagine he's building a hospital down there and anything to stay alive for days and days, weeks and weeks, however long. I'm curious, and don't answer this if you're not comfortable, but has he ever reached out to yell at you or say, how could you be doing these things? And do you feel safe in your life?
Yeah, I mean, again, the idea of being afraid of him is hysterical to me. Right. So, but I know that his followers can be unhinged, and I have had some issues in the past. But I live in New York City, so feel very safe here. And reached out. Yes, he sued me for $100 million. So I guess that was his form of reaching out. But we recently settled that case, so that's over and done with, and I don't know that he'll be reaching out again.
Yeah, no. I'm sure that's very fine with you. Let's see. I see one more question here. Well, I'm going to ask this one and then I'll end with one more. But somebody said, can you talk about how The Apprentice shaped him, if it did?
I never watched it. Well, that's actually not true. I was stuck in a doctor's office and it was on TV. So I think I watched 5 minutes of it. And I was so horrified at what was in front of my eyes. It was so tawdry and weird and poorly done. I was shocked that anybody took it seriously. But I had the disadvantage, one, of knowing him my whole life and being a New Yorker. So we in New York didn't understand how it played in the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. So how I think I don't know that it's, well, let me put it this way. The biggest issue with The Apprentice, thanks Mark Burnett, is that it rehabilitated a man who was an utter failure. Mm-hmm. And it did it by lying to people and claiming that he was some brilliant success. And I think that was the Donald's entree to a broader audience who maybe didn't know the way we in New York did about what a failure he was and what a massive advantage he had by being my grandfather's son. And they just fell for it. And that gave him a huge assist in terms of name recognition and the idea, this completely false premise that he was smart and accomplished and could actually create anything. So that's The Apprentice, and Mark Burnett have a lot to answer for.
Mm-hmm. and the agents who took the tapes and all the.
Oh God, the cover-ups. My goodness. Yeah.
Well, I would like to end on a slightly more hopeful note. So you gave us a little bit when I asked about the election, about what people can do, but more broadly, what do you think is important for Americans in general to be doing right now, and those people who have to interact with Trump in particular?
It's tricky because I think, we don't do ourselves any favors by looking away and pretending that everything's fine when it's clearly not. However, it is important to be hopeful, and it's important to look to other people to derive that sense of possibility. So as we talked about earlier, way too many corporations, white shoe law firms, institutions of higher learning capitulated. And these are institutions with massive amounts of power and massive financial resources. There are still individuals who are going up against him, E.G. and Carroll, of course, being one of them, Letitia James, James Comey, but people in the streets standing up for their neighbors and protecting them from the depredations of ICE agents. And people still, doing the work that was being done by USAID, people standing strong against the onslaughts of this administration in the face of real danger. So we need to take a lot of hope and inspiration from that, because it is up to us. We're the people who, if we stay positive and we stay together and we recognize the power in community, we can make real inroads into turning this around. And unfortunately, this is a very dark time, but weirdly, in human history, it's often in the darkest, most terrifying times that we have the most potential to make long-lasting change for the good. And if we understand anything about America, is that it's always had possibility, and it's a possibility that has never been fully embraced. And that is the potential to be a truly representative multicultural democracy. And we have that within our grasp if we continue to believe in it and continue to believe that the power is ours. So that's what I would say to people, even though things look difficult and scary and hard right now, because they are, but that doesn't mean we need to be debilitated by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it reminds us what we value and what's worth fighting for.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Mary. It is, first of all, a pleasure to have the chance to talk to you. I have admired you from afar, and I think that your willingness to be so honest, to put yourself out there and bring your wisdom and perspective really helps people make sense of what they're seeing, which empowers them to take action. And so that makes a huge difference. Thank you very much.
Well, Jessica, thank you. This was such an incredible conversation. I don't often get the opportunity to have such an in-depth conversation with somebody who has such a profound grasp of what's going on. So I really appreciate it. And I had such a great time. So thank you. And thanks.
No grasping.
You guys are awesome.
I want to thank the Big Tent folks and the audience. Please be sure to follow Big Tent USA on Substack. It's at the Big Tent USA. You can subscribe to be a member on their website at bigtentusa.org. Mary, what's your Substack called?
My Substack is called The Good in Us, because again, I believe in that. So please check that out. I'm also on YouTube at Mary Trump Media.
That's awesome. And I'm on Substack and all the places as Jessica Yellen and News Not Noise. Please follow me if you don't already. And thanks everybody for all your passion for the country, caring and joining tonight. It's great to see everyone.
Thanks, everybody.